Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Week 12 overview for Education 438, Teaching Reading and Writing in the Content Area. This week, we are transitioning from talking about closed reading to talking about writing instruction. I feel like we've hit up the big ones so far this semester. We've done academic language, we've done vocabulary instruction, we've done reading instruction, and now it's time to spend some time with thinking about the teaching of writing. And so for the next couple of weeks, that's it's going to be our main focus alongside with an inquiry project that we're going to start this week and continue over the next couple of weeks as well. So as always, this video is going to give you a recap of last week, an overview of the topics for this week, as well as learning objectives and essential questions for this week. Then we'll jump into looking at our reading and our assignments for this week. And then any sort of reminders we have, I will mention those at the end of the video. So last week, we really were kind of honed in on the stage 2 of our unit plan design. So I had asked you all to review and revise stage 1 of your unit plan if that was needed. And then we really looked at a couple different things. We looked at, of course, Tier 2 and Tier 3 vocabulary. We looked at creating knowledge and skill-based objectives. But really, Stage 2 asks you to think about the GRASP assessment model and to think about creating performance tasks that align with your knowledge and skills objectives. And so I had really asked you to think about creating those performance tasks, but also creating evaluative criteria for them as well. And thank you all. There was a few of you who stopped into Zoom office hours last week and kept me company for a bit. So thank you for that. So because we didn't do any readings really last week, I don't have a lot of major takeaways, but I do want to mention a few things that I think are really important. So you can just keep those in the back of your mind as we move into, of course, revising stage 2 and then working towards stage 3 later on this month. So I do think it is so essential for teachers to have a solid understanding of what knowledge objectives are and what skill objectives are. So knowledge objectives really they hone in on what content you want students to know, right? Whereas skills objectives really focus in on what students will do with that knowledge. And so making sure that you are constantly reminding yourself of that difference when you're in the classroom and you're creating your own objectives for any unit or for any sort of daily lesson plan, just keep that in mind, the difference between those two. One of the things that I like the most about performance tasks is student-friendly language. They are written for students. I think too many times our assignments, our performance tasks, our objectives are written very much in teacher speak and not necessarily in accessible language, student-friendly language. So I really like the performance tasks. That's one of the things that we think about consistently, right? Is writing them towards the student, writing them in student-friendly language. And then finally, I want you to think about the importance of making sure that the evaluative criteria for your performance tasks align with the skills and knowledge that you're asking students to demonstrate through those tasks. And while I'm spending some time with your stage 2 unit plans this week, if I notice that those don't quite align, I'll give you feedback on that. But it's just something to keep in mind. All right, let's talk about week 12. So week 12, we are moving on to one of our other major course texts, and that text is The Writing Revolution 2.0. This is the most recent of our texts. This version or this edition came out a year ago, so it's very, very fresh. And one of the things that you'll learn through reading this is, of course, what the writing revolution is, which we use the kind of term or the acronym TWR synonymously with Hockman method. So you're going to learn what the Hockman method is, and you're going to learn the principles of writing that kind of underlie that method. Then you're also going to think about the importance of sentence instruction in building foundational writing skills. And I will mention this a lot probably in this video, but teaching sentence building, teaching sentence structure is not just for elementary school teachers, okay? Secondary teachers need to be focusing on the basics and on foundational skills as well. You will learn about sentence expansion activities for understanding, processing, and writing about new information or complex content. You'll look at note taking for foundational knowledge and explicit instruction. So, note taking is such an important skill. I mentioned this with our close reading content when I was talking about annotating, right? Annotating and note taking are skills that I think are not explicitly taught enough. Oh, moving on to the CCSS anchor standards for writing. We've really kind of honed in on the reading ones. Let's talk about the writing ones. And for that, we'll be returning back to getting to the core of literacy. You'll be looking at chapter 5 there. And then, not related necessarily to your reading, but maybe related. We are going to be moving into a project that's going to take up the next couple weeks. And this is an inquiry project where I'm going to ask you to think about a question you have in relation to our content from this semester. It could be writing instruction, reading instruction, multimodality, vocabulary, and to create basically a research question and some sub questions surrounding kind of that topic you're interested in exploring further and identifying some reliable sources. So, this week, our whole goal is to craft questions and to identify sources for that. We're going to be spending a lot of time on Wednesday Zoom doing just that. I will model that for you. Learning objectives. You will familiarize yourself with the principles of the writing revolution, Hoffman method of writing instruction through reading and annotating Hoffman and Wechsler's introduction. So introduction in the writing revolution kind of takes the place of chapter 1, just so you know. Then in chapter 2, you're going to move to understand the importance of foundational sentence instruction through learning explicit activities to strengthen sentence formation. So we're going to be spending some time with teaching complete sentences. What is a fragment? What is a run-on? How do we tell if a sentence is complete? This is especially important for us who are working with English language learners and just diverse learners in general. We often make the assumption that all of our learners understand how to craft simple and complex sentences without explicitly teaching them how to do so. So, chapter 2 is really going to get into ways of doing that. And what I love about this book is it's a quick read, but they give you a ton of example activities and strategies that you could literally go into your classroom tomorrow and put to use. Then in chapter 3, we're going to examine sentence expansion and note-taking strategies to help students think analytically about text content and how to create written responses to deepen text comprehension. So we're going to take what we learned about foundational sentence instruction in chapter 2 and build on that, right? By thinking about sentence expansion activities, note-taking strategies, and once again, the authors of the Writing Revolution are going to give you a lot of concrete methods to do this. Then you will continue to apply knowledge of Common Core to your current and future teaching through examining the anchor writing standards. And then finally, you're going to prepare for upcoming inquiry projects and presentations through crafting research questions and selecting accredited journal articles or chapters in which you can address those questions through. All right, you know I love to give you some essential questions to think about while you're reading this week. And I know that the reading feels really heavy this week, but I promise that the chapters in the Writing Revolution go very quickly because a lot of it is example activities that you can use. But here's what I want you to think about as you're reading and as you're annotating. How do we teach writing explicitly and in a sequence of logical steps to ensure that our students become clear and coherent writers? We'll talk about this a lot on Wednesday when I have you do some free writing, but I cannot tell you how many teachers I had that would just assign an essay and just leave us to figure out what that meant. There was always this assumption that we knew how to write and we knew how to write prolonged writing assignments. So I really want you to think about how we can follow logical steps, how we can scaffold and build instruction upon other instruction to make sure that our students become confident, clear, coherent writers, critical writers, right? So think about that question. What is the purpose of the Hoffman method, also known as the Writing Revolution? What are its principles? How might it differ from other approaches to writing in the classroom? Why is focusing on sentence level writing instruction so essential, even at the secondary level? Now, you all know that I was an English teacher, and I gravitate towards literature. I love teaching literature. It has been my Everest to get better as a writing instructor, and part of that meant that I had to really basically teach myself how to teach writing essentials like sentences. Okay. So think about that, right? Why, even at the secondary level, should we focus on sentence level writing instruction first? How do sentence expansion and note-taking activities help students to think analytically about content? And how do these two things help them craft written responses that reflect that analytical thinking? And then, of course, this is an interesting question. How do the Common Core writing standards align with this writing to learn philosophy? I am a big believer that we can't really separate writing from content, right? Especially for teaching writing well. So we also write to learn. We write to learn content. We write to learn ourselves. We write to learn about the world around us. We write for audiences so they can learn from us. So yeah, as we're delving into chapter 5 of the Core of Literacy this week, I want you to think about that, right? In what ways do these writing standards present us with a guidebook that kind of matches that writing to learn philosophy? So before I get into reading an assignment for this week, just a reminder that we have a required Zoom meeting this Wednesday from 5 to 6. Please, please, please try to be there. I'm going to be modeling how to craft and create research questions and how to kind of find sources and materials that align with those. So preparing for inquiry projects, your research questions and your resources are due this coming Sunday by 11:59 p.m. So I'll explain this in a sec, but note that the project itself is not due. I want to check in and make sure that you're on the right track with creating research questions and choosing accredited articles, right? Articles that are really going to give you some content material to back up or to explore those research questions with. So I want to check on that first before you actually dive into the writing of this, okay? So I am going to take us to this week's overview. I already went over topics, objectives. This video will appear here as it always does. So your assigned reading. You're going to read in the Writing Revolution, chapters 1, 2, and 3. Like I said, I know it feels like a lot, but once you get started, you'll see that it breezes by pretty quickly, as well as chapter 5 in getting to the core of literacy. Our required Zoom meeting is, of course, this Wednesday from 5 to 6. Can't believe it's already November. It's crazy. And then your assignment is, of course, preparing for inquiry projects, research questions, and resources. I'm going to go over this now, and I'm probably going to say this twice or multiple times in this video. I would really hold off on doing this project until after our Wednesday Zoom meeting. You can definitely read over the instructions and be thinking about it, but I do know that some of you like to submit your work early, and I would say just hold on. I mean, you can come to Wednesday Zoom with like a question in mind, but I want to model this for you and I want you to do some work in your breakout rooms, some brainstorming work before you submit this or you turn it in, okay? Then, of course, we've got some upcoming textbook readings for week 13 in case you want to get ahead here. Okay, so I will give you a more detailed breakdown on this actual project next week when you're working on it. But this is a preparation assignment for our inquiry projects, okay? So for this prep assignment, your objective is going to be to formulate an overarching question you have regarding the teaching of reading, writing, vocabulary, multiliteracies, discussion, really any topic that we've covered so far this semester is fair game at the particular grade level and within the particular content area you plan to instruct. So for example, I'm a 10th grade English teacher. My research question would, of course, clap back to the subject area and the grade level that I plan on teaching. In order to address your question and sub-questions, you will find 2 to 3 accredited journal articles or chapter excerpts outside of our course readings that address these questions to review and analyze. As someone who, I have a research degree, I am kind of a stickler for you finding articles that are peer reviewed, chapters that are peer reviewed, that are accredited, that are going to give you good evidence-based refereed material, okay? So we can talk a little bit on Wednesday about what that means. And maybe you find 2 accredited journal articles and then you find a 3rd blog that you just want to include because it's really important. That's fine, but at least 2 of your resources need to be accredited, okay? So in week 13, so next week, you will then read these chosen journal articles and chapters and write up your findings in a report that demonstrates clear analysis of your articles, relates what you learn about your inquiry to your inquiry and future teaching practice, and that follows APA guidelines. Okay. Even though I am requiring that you use APA, that you're doing a very kind of basic lit review here, you can choose the medium that you want for your report. This could be in Canva, PowerPoint, Google Slides, Word doc, PDF, etc. You will turn in these reports on Sunday, November 16th. So this coming Sunday, you're turning in your research questions, your sub-questions, and your resources. And then the following Sunday, you're turning in your actual report. And then on the 19th, you are presenting that report in small groups on our required Zoom meeting. So this project really has three parts, and in a lot of ways, it will extend over about 3 weeks. Okay. So I'm going to explain these directions in more detail on Wednesday. So you note here, once again, I will be modeling this work at our Wednesday Zoom meeting. And then we're working on creating our own in breakout rooms. So I highly, highly recommend one more time holding off on turning this in until after class on Wednesday. So really, this preparation work involves two things. Formulating an overarching question you have, creating 2 to 3 sub-questions, okay, that get a little bit more specific, and then searching for those 2 to 3 accredited journal articles or book chapters that you believe will speak to your question and sub-questions. I am asking, in some ways, for a slight annotated bibliography here. I'm going to ask you for the full APA citation for your article or your book chapter that you find, with a brief 1 to 2 sentence description of why you think that article or book chapter might address your question. Remember, you don't actually have to read your articles this week, although I don't think it hurts to get started early, but I would definitely read through the abstracts to make sure that they are going to give you enough material that speaks to your research question and sub-questions. Then I just have a little template here for you for submitting this, okay? This is only 5 points. This is a check-in. This is so I, next Monday, can open this up and say, okay, your research question is looking pretty solid. Your sub-questions relate and extend your research question. And the articles that you found, the chapters that you found really do seem to speak to this, okay? And then of course, the little mini rubrics there. So one other thing that I included in this week's module is just a link to some excellent literacy journals. I'm not saying you have to use these, but if you don't really know where to begin, there's some great journals here. You can also, and I'll mention this on Wednesday too, the UNM library database is great. The librarians are great. People can help you, okay? So I'm going to stop my screen share. I'm sad that we didn't have any animal visitors today. They're all asleep. But yeah, dive into writing this week, and I'm looking forward to, I mean, maybe it's the nerd in me. I love crafting research questions. I love talking about crafting research questions. And I love inquiry. I love just choosing a topic that I'm really curious or passionate about and exploring it. And that's what I hope this ongoing assignment for the next couple of weeks will give to you. So I'm going to end there because this went on a little long, I know, but really looking forward to seeing everybody on Wednesday. And as always, reach out if you have any questions for me. See you soon.